There's a sense in which financial inclusion is around poverty, disadvantagedness and debt, and those are the words that people automatically, in my understanding, actually recognise what we're about. If we could identify the barriers around financial inclusion, and I give you a warning on this one, then I should really ask you to home in on 3 important messages that you would like me to take back to the Prime Minister.
The whole financial inclusion scene, to me, seems to be characterised by incredibly complex rules, regulations, systems, but I think there are examples of ways in which government regulation can be simplified to make it easier for vulnerable people to access the money they're entitled to. We need to simplify the system somewhere in here to make it easier for families to navigate it.
One of the ways in which people make sort of portal systems and one-stop shop systems more accessible can be to utilise technology. And I suppose one of the things that we would want to see is the partnering of those new technologies with the continuation of face-to-face provision.
One of the effects of the rural area is that people don't come until later in the process because of you've got to make a big effort to go and get the advice.
Vulnerable people still need that direct advocacy support. And the reality is that people are finding simple money management incredibly difficult. There is absolutely massive unmet need out there.
Education is obviously the big key in all this, and trying to get over to people that money can bring you many good things in life, but it can also bring a lot of damage to your life.
We need to invest in our smaller communities to help make them sustainable. The people who live there aren't going to go away just because it's more sustainable to be in bigger communities in terms of services.
But we're here talking about social inclusion, financial inclusion. The one thing that's going to take that away from a lot of people in a large rural area like Devon is the post offices disappearing.
In order to get cash, actual physical cash, which you do need a lot in the rural economy, because you need to pay the milkman, you need to pay your neighbour because you owe them a fiver, you need to pay for the veg box, whatever, you need that cash. A lot of people come to the post office.
I think the reality is that when you look at poverty, it is linked to peripherality. And peripherality is linked to transport networks. The further away you are from accessing that key transport network, the more likely you are to experience poverty.
Sufficient affordable housing in villages enables, as it were, daughters to live close to their parents and to provide those kind of informal care, and for sons to live close enough to take their children to school, and for local people to take caring jobs in an expanding care sector which will be needed with an elderly population.
We are really getting in a bad state where housing, or the land that's available for housing, has to subsidise the rest of the public sector. And I think that would be a message back, that the government cannot expect to meet all the costs of public sector, the demands of public sector, on the back of private sector-led housing schemes.
Can I just make a point about one thing that ties together for me what's been said about affordable housing and post offices and transport? And it's the planning system and the way it impacts on people like David in terms of housing locations. The concept of sustainability drives David to locate new housing in places which have got a bus service, a school, shops, a post office, etc., etc. What does that do for the smaller communities that don't have those things or are at the margin of having those things? The pursuit of sustainability in the bigger communities is actually making the smaller communities less sustainable. And it's not surprising that as a result the demand drops away for things like post offices. And I think there's a real challenge in thinking through housing location issues in rural areas, not to build 200 houses in an estate on the edge of a small village, but the fine-grained engagement that individual communities need.
In my own experience, I've always operated on short-term funding, and I know the the sheer frustration of it, because, okay, you can apply for a grant from whoever, and you get 3 years funding, but you rejoice and you think, we've arrived at last. But between a year and 18 months through the project that you've established or whatever, you then realise that the funding is going to be cut off just like that.
The first point on the financial inclusion front I'd make is that we need long-term funding to support the sustainability of the embryonic organisations we've got. That's not to deny that as councils and other partners we've got a part to play in that, but I think we need to see at least 7 to 10-year funding.
The problem is, at this point in time, is our RDA funding through Devon Renaissance Programme runs out at that particular point in time. It runs out on the 31st of March of this year, so it means that we'll be having a funding shortfall of 116,500 with an increase of 50% more machines.
It takes 2 to 3 years to get a project fully successful, the communications right, the trust from the communities if that's where they're operating, to get the right staffing. Then if funding pulled away, staff leave, there's a big gap, and lo and behold something similar crops up somewhere else, and in 3 years time it has the same problem again. It's just repeating, and it seems that if you just had longer term funding, you get these projects fully successful and rolled out.
Okay, well, we're outreach workers, so what we do, when we first started, we would just go to people's homes, which is really good for those who have either got a physical disability or feeling a bit emotional, but then we've soon found that there are a certain band of people that actually it's better if we had a morning a week here. One thing I learnt pretty quickly actually with this job is how people's lifestyle, health and well-being go hand in hand with their finances. Budgeting, it can make such a difference to people. Simple hints and tips people don't think of, like making a meal planner and a shopping list, just getting people to have a think about where their money goes.
And that's a marvellous example of what can be achieved, but it has to be done on a one-to-one basis.
I think we're very lucky in CAB, and particularly in our community, that we've got the trust of the local people. And we also have the benefit of our CAB nationally, of our reputation.
I often see clients who have tried their best in terms of trying to manage their problems and trying to contact creditors, and often it almost seems like if it's come from the client, it's ignored or disregarded by the creditor, but by virtue of almost saying exactly what the client has said, but coming from Citizens Advice, because I say I'm from the Citizens Advice Bureau, it's got the letterhead, they'll take notes of it.
And CAB is so well known, and if there is one in the area, in their vicinity, then I think they will go there, because from my experience they see that as a place which is in many ways a friendly place.
As well as the anonymity, we are very easy to find. We've got awful facilities. We're based in the middle of the town but out of the way. And the centre is ideal. If we have training sessions or we want to do anything with clients, and there's other rooms available, so it's really an excellent centre for us.
The major problem is how some of these CABs are going to continue in the future and the financial implications. That I think is a great source that we have to try to tackle. I thought that was very inspiring, and again it showed a number of different things really, but it showed how a group of people who had a vision about something are making a difference and making something happen.
The credit unions in Devon hadn't really reached the people that need credit union services. With the help of the housing associations, the social landlords, there was an in to the people that would benefit from credit union services. And I was also very fired up with the idea of the partnership approach. So we gradually evolved, and Devon Pound became the working arm of the Community Banking Partnership.
I've always been a fan of credit unions. I've never quite worked out how some of them have worked, because they operate very differently, although have the same principle. But a great fan of them really, and if it can actually help and facilitate people, as we've seen in the last 2 days, to manage their debt and eventually get out of debt, and also to be able to think through how they can save money, then I think that's a marvellous example.
I actually went on doing my job shadowing with the outreach workers, and there was one chap there, the first customer we saw, and he went through the whole process, talked about saving. He's always struggled to get a present for his daughter for her birthday and like that. And he said this is the first time in his life he's actually saved. What I like to think is we do banking with a conscience, really, so that we actually look at other things, not just the actual product, look at the person and what else we can add to it.
It spoke for itself, really, because I think the figure was 18 months ago that they had just over 200 people involved, members, I think they refer to them as, and now nearly approaching 500. I think that speaks for itself of the way in which it can be developed. I thought it was a great example of something that was good initiative, which was really helping not only young people but also middle-aged people to be able to work and to get to work, to actually rent one of these scooters. The person had to put in £8, and now they're raising that to £20. And they seem not to have any particular problem about that. And I think that, you know, again, it's about trying to make it sustainable for the future.
What we are here to do is to offer a sustainable service for the, for people in our rural communities. And what we do here is we help people to stay within their rural communities.
Right. I'm a qualified hairdresser and I've just not been able to find the work, and I popped in the new year. And goodness me, it all just happened really within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks I was mobile. And
how are you finding it?
Yeah, brilliant. Already I'm going for things that I haven't been able to before. Because I've got wheels.
We saw back in 2001 when I first came on board, we saw many young people leaving this area to go to the urban centres. What we're trying to do is to keep them out in the rural communities to maintain a balance of age groups.
I thought the visit to Belston Village was a very interesting, very important one for us, really. It recognised the worth of the voluntary and community sector, and you couldn't be not impressed by the sheer energy and the life of some of those people. Just for example, a good illustration is that not only they keep the village hall in good repair, but they have a contingency fund and they raise an extra £8,000 a year. I thought that's quite phenomenal. But also more important than that is the way in which they're using the village hall for the community.
It is the knob of village life.
Right.
It's the only community building. There's no church hall. It's also where several bodies in the village, such as the parish council, the commoners, the parochial church council, they have their meetings here. It houses the post office 2 mornings a week. I mean, anything that we feel develops the cohesiveness and the community spirit, short of the cricket ground, happens here, really.
And what does the post office actually provide?
All major services.
Right.
Anything that a main post office can do,
Nearly.
virtually they can do.
I've come to the conclusion now, going around many areas of rural England, that every rural community, rural settlement, needs a focal point. And whether that focal point is a church, the pub, the village hall, the school, if there's still a school there, as long as they've got a focal point, then I think it can be the springboard for many other things to happen. I think there are plenty of solutions out there, and we are about, our organisation is really about, not only doing some analysis and identifying the problems, identifying the issues, but then say to ourselves, what are the creative opportunities and the solutions that are around? I think we're living in a far more sort of social mobile world and communities now, and that people are beginning to open up to new ideas, and I think that's great.